Robbie grew up gravely. He followed the men about, listening to their discussions. Junius never treated him like a little boy because he didn't know how little boys should be treated. If Robbie made an observation, the two men listened courteously and included the remark in their conversation, or even used it as the germ of an investigation. They tracked down many things in the course of an afternoon. Every day there were several raids on Junius's encyclopedia. A huge sycamore put out a horizontal limb over the meadow stream, and on it the three sat, the man hanging their feet into the water and moving pebbles with their toes, while Robbie tried extravagantly to imitate them. Reaching the water was one of his criteria of manhood. Jacob had by this time given up shoes. Robbie had never worn any in his life. The discussions were erudite. Robbie couldn't use childish talk, for he had never heard any. They didn't make conversation. Rather, they let a seedling of thought spout by itself and then watched with wonder while it sent out branching limbs. They were surprised at the strange fruit their conversation bore, for they didn't direct their thinking, nor trellis, nor trim it the way so many people do. There on the limb the three sat. Their clothes were rags, and their hair was only hacked off to keep it out of their eyes. The men wore long, untrimmed beards. They watched the water skaters on the surface of the pool below them, a pool which had been deepened by idling toes. The giant tree above them whisked softly in the wind and occasionally dropped a leaf like a brown handkerchief. Robbie was 5 years old. "I think sycamores are good," he observed when a leaf fell in his lap. Jacob picked up the leaf and stripped the parchment from its ribs. "Yes," he agreed. "They grow by water. Good things love water. Bad things always been dry." "Sycamores are big and good," said Junius. "It seems to me that a good thing, or a kind thing, must be very large to survive. Little good things are always destroyed by evil little things. Rarely is a big thing poisonous or treacherous. For this reason, in human thinking, bigness is an attribute of good and littleness of evil. Do you see this, Robbie?" "Yes," said Robbie. "I see that. Like elephants. Elephants are often evil, but when we think of them, they seem gentle and good." "But water," Jacob broke in. "Do you see about the water, too?" "No, not about the water. Oh, but I see," said Junius. "You mean that water is the seat of life. Of the three elements, water is the sperm, earth the womb, and sunshine the mold of growth." Thus they taught him nonsense. The people of the pastures of heaven recoiled from Junius Maltby after the death of his wife and his two boys. Stories of his callousness during the epidemic grew to such proportions that eventually they fell down of their own weight and were nearly forgotten. But although his neighbors forgot that Junius had read while his children died, they could not forget the problem he was becoming. Here in the fertile valley he lived in fearful poverty, while other families built small fortunes, bought Fords and radios, put in electricity, and went twice a week to the moving pictures in Monterey or Salinas. Junius degenerated and became a ragged savage. The men of the valley resented his good bottom land, all overgrown with weeds, his untrimmed fruit trees, and his fallen fences. The women thought with loathing of his unclean house with its littered dooryard and dirty windows. Both men and women hated his idleness and his complete lack of pride. For a while they went to visit him, hoping by their neat examples to drag him from his slothfulness, but he received them naturally and with the friendliness of equality. He wasn't a bit ashamed of his poverty, nor of his rags. Gradually, his neighbors came to think of Junius as an outcast. No one drove up the private road to his house anymore. They outlawed him from decent society and resolved never to receive him, should he visit them. Junius knew nothing about the dislike of his neighbors. He was still gloriously happy. His life was as unreal, as romantic, and as unimportant as his thinking. He was content to sit in the sun and to dangle his feet in the stream. If he had no good clothes, at least he had no place to go which required good clothes. Although the people almost hated Junius, they had only pity for the little boy Robbie. The women told one another how horrible it was to let a child grow up in such squalor, but because they were mostly good people, they felt a strong reluctance for interfering with Junius's affairs. "Wait until he's school age," Mrs. Banks said to a group of ladies in her own parlor. "We couldn't do anything now if we wanted to. He belongs to that father of his, but just as soon as the child is 6, the county'll have something to say, let me tell you." Mrs. Allen nodded and closed her eyes earnestly. "We keep forgetting that he's Mamie Quaker's child as much as Maltby's. I think we should have stepped in long ago, but when he goes to school, we'll give that poor little fellow a few things he never had." "The least we can do is to see that he has enough clothes to cover him," another of the women agreed. It seemed that the valley lay crouched in waiting for the time when Robbie should go to school. When, at term opening after his 6th birthday, he did not appear, John Whiteside, the clerk of the school board, wrote a letter to Junius Maltby. I hadn't thought of it," said Junius when he read it. I guess you'll have to go to school." "I don't want to go," said Robbie. "I know. I don't much want you to go either, but we have laws. The law has a self-protective appendage called penalty. We have to balance the pleasure of breaking the law against the punishment. The Carthaginians punished even misfortune. If a general lost a battle through bad luck, he was executed. At present, we punish people for accidents of birth and circumstance in much the same manner." In the ensuing discussion, they forgot all about the letter. John Whiteside wrote a very curt note. "Well, Robbie, I guess you'll have to go," said Junius when he received it. "Of course, they'll teach you a great many useful things." "Why don't you teach me?" Robbie pleaded. "Oh, I can't. You see, I've forgotten the things they teach." "Oh, I don't want to go at all. I don't want to learn things." "I know you don't, but I can't see any other way out." And so one morning, Robbie trudged to school. He was clad in an ancient pair of overalls, out at the knees and seat, a blue shirt from which the collar was gone, and nothing else. His long hair hung over his gray eyes like the forelock of a range pony. The children made a circle around him in the schoolyard and stared at him in silence. They had all heard of the poverty of the Maltbys and of Junius's laziness. The boys looked forward to this moment when they could torture Robbie. Here was the time come. He stood in their circle, and they only stared at him. No one said, "Where'd you get them clothes?" or "Look at his hair," the way they had intended to. The children were puzzled by their failure to torment Robbie. As for Robbie, he regarded the circle with serious eyes. He was not in the least frightened. "Don't you play games?" he asked. "My father said you'd play games." And then the circle broke up with howls. "He doesn't know any games! Oh, let's teach him Pee-wee! Oh, no, nigger baby! Oh, listen! Prisoner's base first! He doesn't know any games!" And although they didn't know why, they thought it rather a fine thing not to know games. Robbie's thin face was studious. "We'll try Pee-wee first, he decided. He was clumsy at the new games, but his teachers did not hoot at him. Instead, they quarreled for the privilege of showing him how to hold the Pee-wee stick. There are several schools of technique in Pee-wee. Robbie stood aside, listening for a while, and at last chose his own instructor.